My name is Matthew Todd, and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Really pleased today to be joined by Fernando Hönig, CEO and founder of StackZone. And good morning. Great to have you here.
Hi, Matthew. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
No worries. I look forward to finding out more about StackZone, about the journey that's led you to where things are now. But if you can just kick things off for us by just giving you a little bit of a brief intro into exactly what StackZone is and a little bit about your background as well.
Sure. I was born in Argentina, and essentially I started my, let's say, IT career when I was 17 years old. Initially, it was, remember, I'm 40, almost 41 now. So imagine when I was 17, there was no cloud. There was almost no internet at that point. I was the guy basically installing modems in people's computers at home. So I started my career by doing that. Then I moved to more like a support engineer type of role. And eventually in 2011, I started interacting more with cloud computing. Then in 2014, I came to the UK working for a cloud company here. And I think at that point is where I found this kind of idea of building something on my own.
Yeah.
So this is StackZone. We are a cloud management platform. And essentially what we aim for is to build best practices from scratch with automation, making sure that organizations start with the right foot on the cloud. And if they are already in the cloud, is how they kind of get back to the right track,
I see. So, yeah, from what I understand, there are quite a few different cloud management platforms out these days, but a lot of them focus on kind of operational or developer efficiency, making it easy to provision what they're trying to do. But it sounds like you're taking quite a different perspective and trying to introduce a layer on top of that almost of what those best cloud practices are for different types of scenarios. Is that right?
Yeah. So, if you think about cloud being evolving in the last, I will say, 10 years, quite rapidly, and sometimes, our time does not allow us to understand those many services in every single cloud available. So as a business, probably what you want to do is you want to focus on your own product. You want to make sure that you're providing the best value proposition to your customers, and sometimes you kind of delay or forget about making sure that everything is compliant, that everything is encrypted, with all the latest announcements or news around, data being, data being publicly available so what we try to do here is trying to make sure that everything is what it should be and that it stays like that, for every new project that you build.
Yeah, I see. No, sounds interesting. I think we'll definitely dig into some more details about that. But first, just taking a step back slightly, you were kind of in the consulting space before founding StackZone. So where did that idea for StackZone then start? What was the motivation to trying to kick this off as a platform rather than continuing with a consulting as a solution?
That's great. So when as I mentioned before, when I came to the UK, I started working for this cloud organization, and then I founded my kind of a second startup. The first was in Argentina. It was a hosting company. The second one it was a cloud consultancy business.
Yeah.
So Essentially, what we were doing back then was kind of implementing these best practices on every single customer, and we realized that it was a real need, and the need, it was more around customer self-serving,
Okay.
so trying to understand exactly what they were being built in their environments, in their accounts. And during the pandemic, funnily enough, in 2020, we decided to kind of make this self-serve for customers, and to have some sort of a simple interface, that you don't need to deep dive into each service and each parameter that you need to build for integrate those cloud services into your environment.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that was the kind of a main driver and the genesis of building StackZone.
I see. Now that makes a lot of sense, seeing that changing kind of customers and their needs. I can see how the self-serve approach would suit them better, but also give you, a degree of scalability that you probably wouldn't have had with a more manual approach as well. So I suppose, given that identification of that problem, of those needs, then how did you go about validating that, creating that initial version, and what did that look like?
So with the cloud consultancy business, we had a number of customers that were kind of eager to try, eager to try these platforms. So we used that as a way to start, and we basically validate almost, I would say, every single item in our roadmap. So as part of StackZone, we have what we call our wish list or feedback page, where customers come here and indicate, okay, we would like to have this, we would like to have that,
Yeah.
and based on our experience and what, what's the art of possible with the current cloud vendors, is what we start putting things on the platform, and make sure that everything we build is tied to a customer need or customer requirement.
I see it, and it sounds like, especially with cloud vendors adding more and more services themselves over time, and there are a few different cloud providers out there, but there's a few big ones. How did you? I can imagine the initial scope or potential for scope could have been absolutely massive. So how did you manage to constrain that to something that was not feeling incomplete to the early clients?
Yeah, so what we initially thought when building StackZone was market share. So we took it a deep dive into which ones were the cloud vendors that were part of the top three, and based on that, we started thinking of how can we integrate these services. How can we make sure that when a customer requires a specific security compliance enablement, we can do it at scale, and we can do it in a way that it takes less time for a customer to actually implement it.
Yeah.
So with StackZone, what we essentially do is with a few clicks, you just enable that, but you don't enable just for the existing environments you have, but also you create what we call a framework. And that framework allows you to, whenever you need to create new environments, new projects, that everything looks the same, and you don't have to kind of have kind of a list of 20 items that, I need to enable this, I need to enable that. I forgot about this, I forgot about that. So with automation, we solve that sort of human error factor. That's always part of building software.
Yeah, I see. Now that makes a lot of sense. So with that validation then of that roadmap with the clear customers and customer needs to build against, then how long did it take you to get something off the ground to start with?
So we, as I said, we started in, I would say, May 2020.
Yeah.
By the end of 2020, we had what we call the engine, which is basically what drives all this automation.
Yeah.
And then early 2021, we had our first front-end, back-end developer. And then since May 2021, we've been building the interface, all the authentication, and making sure that everything is secure on our side. By the end of, I will say, October 2021, we were a team of 6 people. And at that point, we realized that we wanted to, scale, and we wanted to make this a reality for as many customers as possible. Yeah. And we started looking into funding. So that's basically where we've been into by the end of 2021.
I see. And that funding then, was that purely for customer acquisition? Was that building features that were missing from the product? How did that kind of break down? What were you looking to do to accelerate that growth?
Well, I mean, initially it was more around making the product off the ground, so we wanted to make sure that the product was ready, available for customers as soon as possible. And so we needed to increase or grow our engineering team.
Yeah.
And we realized by the end of 2021 that, with bootstrapping, it was going to be quite a long journey. And one of the main things here is that you want to be first. You want to make sure that you get your product early, so then you can potentially shift to a different product, or maybe your thesis about what you're solving, it wasn't right. So we wanted to put our product to customers' hands as soon as possible.
Yeah, I see. So you wanted to launch with something that was complete enough that customers weren't going to be looking elsewhere or frustrated by any particular barriers or problems they encountered if they only got 60% or 80% of the way there towards what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it was everything around reducing time. So when we initially built StackZone, it was more around, hey, Mr. Customer, this is taking you, 6-8 weeks, potentially 3 months to get done, to get it done. So with StackZone, we make sure that we put that in 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, and it's done. And with that in mind, is where we started to scale our customer base, and they were realizing that it will take money for hiring very, very senior engineers to take care of this, and potentially was going to take time to teach them, or making sure that they understand what security compliance means. So that's why we wanted to put it first, and making sure that we were tackling a kind of a real world problem.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And in terms of types of customers then that were right for the products that you were building, you mentioned security, you mentioned compliance. There are companies of all sorts of shapes and sizes, building on the cloud. Pretty much everyone is these days. So how did you go about finding that kind of sweet spot and definition of that ideal customer that matched your perspective as well as what the product could deliver for them?
Yeah, so we have what we call the 2 kind of ideal customers, right? So one is what we call the end customer, like you mentioned, the every single organization now is taking some sort of a form of shape of cloud computing. Yeah. So it's all about making sure that these customers are able to accelerate that cloud adoption. That they can as I said before, focus on their own product, making sure that they deliver their product with the right capabilities and features, but also understanding that security and compliance and governance is part of what they need to build as well. Yeah. So we are kind of focused mainly on industries that require that sort of compliance. I see. So financial services, healthcare, insurance. So those are the type of kind of an industries that fully require this sort of compliance and governance perspective. But also, there are some retail, telco, machine learning organizations, that they also need to take care of their data, making sure that, it's secure, it's governed in a way, So when you start growing as an organization and you start having more accounts, more engineers touching different things on data, at that point is where you realize, oh, I just have things everywhere that I cannot control anymore, and and then we have the the second kind of ideal customer, which is what we call the enablers, So these MSPs, cloud consultancies that need to onboard customers and do migrations as soon as possible, and for those type of organizations is also StackZone a good solution, because managing, I don't know, 10, 50, 100 customers at scale, and each of these customers having, I don't know, 10, 15 accounts, you just do the maths, it's hundreds of accounts, thousands of accounts that you need to manage. And if you start thinking, okay, for every customer, I need to put a new engineer taking care of it, you're not going to ever scale. There is not such amount of engineers in the market that could take that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's really delivering on, like, efficiency is the obvious thing, but really it's making sure that for the customers that need and demand that compliance, have people responsible for that compliance actually have a solution to solving that otherwise would be incredibly difficult to deliver against. If they, as you say, have teams of engineers, it's incredibly difficult to get them all to, even be aware of all of the security policies, let alone how they should implement them in a consistent way across the organization. That must be a massive undertaking without any kind of automation in place. Correct.
And yeah, perfect. I think you're just getting it quite right. It's all about numbers here. So and scale. So if you're thinking, okay, I mean, the most basic thing, one engineer taking care of one customer, that engineer goes on holiday, got sick, whatever, who's taking care of that? I just need to put someone else into that project. They need to learn about it, and P1s, P2 happen all the time, and 2 a.m. in the morning. So how someone with potentially no access to their accounts will be able to fix something, and that is essentially, if you just extrapolate that, and you think, okay, imagine 100 customers, 5 guys goes on holidays, how massive that would be, to make sure that everything keeps under your radar.
Yeah, and is there an element of service as well as platform and automation to what you provide?
So we basically decided to go full on as a SaaS platform. So we don't do any professional services, and that's why we have this integration with MSPs and partnership with them, because in case that a customer requires some professional services or some sort of companion from a DevOps perspective, we just directly introduce to our partners. So we at this point we're basically looking to create that sort of a network of partners that they can take care of the more in-depth things of the customer, and we just, as I mentioned before, we're in a position to build that framework for them.
Yeah, so I see how that allows you to be very, very focused and very clear on exactly what it is that you're delivering for your customers in that instance. And when it comes then to translating that into pricing, I know you've got the pricing and the calculation live on the site. Was that something that was pretty easy to arrive at? Did that require a bit of testing and work to get right? How did you approach the pricing of a new platform?
Yeah, so one of the main kind of things that we have is that we we wanted to have a clear and transparent pricing. So that's why there is no kind of a hidden button on our website of how much does it cost, or how do you calculate how much will StackZone cost for you. So one of the things here is that we don't charge per user. So the idea is that the platform can be used with different areas of the organization, and everyone could kind of come together into a platform that will give you enough insights for you to make decisions.
Yeah.
We also don't charge by number of accounts. We don't charge by number of instances. We basically charge a percentage of the amount that you use in cloud. And because our platform is essentially a platform that allows you to understand what you're spending and understand how to make the right adjustments, if you spend less, then you're going to pay less for StackZone, and then again, it's all about transparent pricing. So we also have a way for you to understand how much you're spending on StackZone, how much you're going to spend on StackZone this month, etc. So everything is quite clear on that sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, and I think it is clearly tied towards the size and complexity of their deployments that they're running. And we're seeing a few different SaaS platforms start to move away from that per user model of pricing, which I think in many instances can just encourage bad patterns of behavior and ultimately customers not to get the most value.
Exactly. So one of the things that completely discourages us of using this per user thing is password sharing, and we definitely don't want, people to share passwords. In fact, in StackZone, for every user that joins the platform, we enable multi-factor authentication. So it's a pure, each user has its own account, and definitely we discourage people to share passwords, because the idea here is that if you make a change on the platform, that gets logged, and we know exactly, and exactly who made that change and when,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a very good move, and I think for any kind of platform, but especially for one that is promoting best practices and secure best practices, having a business model that essentially rewarded people for sharing passwords would not be a good thing.
Definitely not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of the journey so far, I think we've got a really good picture in terms of how you went about validating and building that product. But I'd love to know a bit more about some of the challenges that you faced on the way to getting it to that stage.
I think the challenge that every single startup faces is there are many challenges, right? So let's start with one. So during this kind of validation process and building the product is finding the right team. I think that is key. And one of the things that you, as a founder, you need to kind of transmit to your people is that you're working for something meaningful, that it really solves a problem to this end customer. It's not that they're not just writing code, and that is something that, sometimes in, big organizations, it kind of fades into that, so I'm writing 10 lines of code an hour and that's it. Actually, what we're building here is something that solves real organization problems at scale, and I think creating that sort of a culture, making sure that, every bug that is introduced, it's impacting a customer, it's something that they make them realize, okay, it's really important what I'm writing, and making sure that for every feature they build, they're not thinking of, okay, we need to test in our demo account, which has, a couple of accounts and that's it. They need to think at scale. They need to think of, okay, how this will be used by 100, 1,000 customers with, dozens of accounts, and that is where I think they start to feel like, oh, I'm really making, some changes here on how the governance and best practices cloud industry operates.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of one of the first challenges. Finding this team that work as a solid rock. That no one feels that is more than anyone else. I mean, obviously in the organization we have kind of a structure. But it's quite open in the sense that everyone has a say. We have these type of meetings when raise your hand and what you think that is not working, what you think that can be improved, that we can do better. So I think that sort of culture and spirit is what really moves the organization forward at a pace that every startup needs.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I've seen firsthand many organizations, especially as they scale, where there are some members of development team and subcultures whereby the developers are just reduced to doing what they're told and no more to get a ticket through. And whether it works or doesn't work, it's someone else's problem. That's product's problem. That's test problem. We've done our bit. And all of those conversations about how they can improve are essentially how can we churn out more code, regardless of whether that code actually moves the product forward, solves problems better for any of their customers. It's unfortunately common to see that. So it's good and interesting to hear that you've been very deliberate about making sure that the developers are problem focused as much as solution focused.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's all about trying to not repeating the same mistakes that you experienced before. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I worked for many other organizations in the past. So kind of I was making kind of a mental notes, like, okay, I don't want this in my company. I don't want this in my company. Oh, this is good to have in my company. So I think when you reach an age where you can have that sort of a decision process of, okay, I don't feel good with this sort of way of working, and I don't want to kind of repeat the same mistakes. So yeah.
Yeah, and is that something that's been easy to hire for and to educate and embed within the culture? How have you kind of approached that?
Well, I'm luckily enough. I'm very, very lucky in terms of the team that we have is a young team. Is people in the region of the 25, 35 years old. So so they come with that sort of spirit of learning and thinking that every day they're learning something new. And even though, because the platform is so broad in the things that we solve, that every single day there is a new challenge, there is something new that they need to fix, and there is this spirit of we call it the 22 rule. So the 22 rule is, I'm going to try to fix something for 20 minutes. If it doesn't work, or if I try twice fixing something and it doesn't work, I raise my hand. There is no more time for this, and I reach out to or I try to solve it in two different ways. It doesn't work, so something else might probably there must be another solution out there, and there'll probably be someone in the team that probably came up with a different solution for this.
Yeah, no, I like that. I've not seen anyone implement that anywhere before, but it certainly sounds like an interesting model, a good model that would, with the right people, would promote positive communication and shared problem solving rather than, it's this bit is my code, I'm only working on my code now. Someone's got an issue with their code. Very kind of egocentric kind of models that I've seen some teams tend to adopt, but it sounds like this approach, could potentially trying to break down some of those issues that you might otherwise have.
And also is one of the things here is not being afraid of being wrong. And I think that should come from the very top, and that's typically always that I say in every meeting that I'm part of is, if you think that I'm wrong, just raise your hand, explain to me why. And sometimes you might not have the entire context, and that's why you think I'm wrong. Probably I'm I don't have the right context, and that's why I'm making a wrong assumption or a statement.
Yeah. No, interesting. I think that's a really interesting approach to kind of team management and making sure that you do have that right kind of culture, especially in a startup, in a scale up, in a company that is growing and getting market share. It's so important to make sure that you not only operate at the right velocity, but that everyone really is, sharing the same perspective on the direction of the product and the types of problems you solve, and I suppose awareness of why those are the important problems to solve as well, right?
Yeah, and again, so as I mentioned, what the first challenge that we faced was, how to hire the right people.
Yeah.
But if you kind of not work on the culture of your company, okay, you're going to start hiring, and the only reason why people will come to your company is because you need to put more money and more money and more money. And money is not, it's quite, not unlimited at this point. So it's more about sharing the values, sharing the mission of the company.
Yeah. And in terms of where you see the product and the team then heading from where you've built it onwards, you mentioned you were keen for it to be a complete product, one of the first products of its type brought to market. How are you kind of planning to take that further forward and make sure that you deliver on that and don't get overtaken by others as you scale?
I think focusing on what our customers are telling us is key. So we have different, let's call it input here. So one, and the most important one for us, is our customers. So we basically build things for them. We also have the direction of where cloud computing is going. And it's definitely not slowing down. The amount of organizations going to cloud is ever increasing. So I think basically at this point is making sure that we take that into account and deliver the promises that we made as a product when we launched. Becoming let's call it a one-stop shop for multi-cloud, multi-tenant cloud management, focus on governance and security.
For StackZone, then, what is that vision? What do you see StackZone looking like in the future? What point are you trying to get it to?
So what we are, our roadmap essentially is to become in, I will say, 12 months, a company of a size of around 75 to 100 employees.
Yeah.
And essentially being operating all over the world. So we have right now a fully remote team. So we are now operating in 5 different countries. And essentially because we are a global platform, we are expanding our operations into the US and to the rest of Europe as well. So that is kind of sort of what we're looking to be in 12 months' time from now.
Yeah, I see. And from a customer acquisition perspective, then, with that global remote team, how have you been able to tackle that without making the mistake of spreading yourself a bit too thin and losing a bit of focus? Do you have any, learnings or lessons or advice for people, trying to do something similar? It'd be interesting to hear how you've managed to, take quite a big ambition and problem and break it down to something quite strategic.
I think, what we did wrong at the beginning, and I think it's always good to mention what we did wrong and how we're trying to fix it, is just what you mentioned, trying to spread too thin and make and say, oh, we can take over the world. So for a very small company, that's definitely not a reality. It's going to be quite difficult, and congratulations if someone did. But But essentially, what you need to focus first is what's your ideal customer, and from that is okay. Let's make it into chunks. So by industry, by location, and start testing, which ones of these ideal customers take your message and understands your proposition,
Yeah.
and then focus on that one, and try to, there's so many organizations in the world, so even if you say, I want to tackle West Coast financial services who are looking for compliance,
Yeah.
there might be hundreds of those, so you don't need to be afraid of saying, oh, this is going to be a very small market for me.
Yeah.
So essentially, what we're looking now is, going into those kind of buckets of customers, who are really feeling the pain of managing hundreds of accounts, and they're receiving sort of audits from different organizations, and they need to somehow demonstrate that they're compliant, and I think it's that where initially StackZone could help them.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice and perspective. And I think sometimes founders can be a bit too, I don't know, maybe drawn to that global potential and possibility, and a bit of thinking, well, if I go this specific, then am I missing out on the rest of them that don't fit inside this? But I think by doing that, they're not appealing as well as they could do, and not being as focused as they could be on trying to generate any kind of element of traction within a particular segment. And I think if you do what you're suggesting of focusing on a very, very specific, niche based on a number of things, industry, geography, all those other elements as well, I think it gives you an opportunity to say, well, there is enough business here to do very well, but let's get really good at doing it here. And then once you get really good at doing it there, then you can take that learning and transplant that to the next chunk and the next one and the next one, and so on and so forth.
Correct. And one of the main things here is you get more customers when they see themselves in your case studies, and I think that is kind of a key to demonstrate your value proposition, so I've helped many customers in the same geography or in the same industry vertical that you're in. So I've nailed it down already. So why don't you just test it by yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot easier to sell into someone when you've got customers that are just like them, that have already seen the success. They can then see themselves having that success with you as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really good advice. And I think, a lot of founders should pay attention to that, especially as they're looking to scale, outside of an initial segment that they got some traction with, or even if they are trying to get traction and wondering how they should go about it. I think that's advice worth following. Is there anything else that springs to mind that you think, other founders may be able to learn from us that you've encountered in your journey so far?
Well, the other thing is the important. It's a bit of a I would say gambling game in terms of who's going to be your first industry, or who should you focus on first. Which sort of geography should I tackle first? And typically, what we think as founders is, I'll go where the big amount of money is, because. But what you need to think of is that at that place, in that particular place, is kind of an ocean, and you're just a little small fish, So it's going to be too much for you at the beginning. So that's why initially, probably best to think of something that is closer to you, that you can. In this kind of a very remote world, that you need to have kind of a name, a reputation, that what you're solving is actually what you're in for a number of years, and you're trustable, So
Yeah.
it's not that you just build a product because, you just had a very enlightenment moment one night and you say, oh, you know what? I'm going to build something for, doing X, Y, Z. And you have no experience in that industry. You just made it because, you just got that idea. So making sure that, you have some sort of a reputation in the industry, that your value proposition is matching your previous experience, and that you found that problem and you're solving that problem with your product in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to have a way of credibility is so important.
Yeah. So, for example, attending different meetups and making sure that you write the right kind of thought leadership content. It will kind of build that credibility on your profile, and I think that's also good for founders and co-founders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes they can be a bit too product focused, a bit too internally focused, and I think that what's is good work. It may not be adding to the credibility that you've got. So I think finding the right people to be involved in the business that can add that credibility if you don't have it is going to be something that's important, as well as what you say about your ideal customer may look like this, but if this is where the money is, chances are everybody else is going to be going there. So why don't you try and prove yourself somewhere that might be easier for you to access first and then build on that.
And you know what? It came to my mind that kind of a picture of, when you have in the top, you have the bike, the motorbike, then you have a car, and then you have a van, and then you have on the bottom one where you have, let's build wheels. And then let's build, the chassis. And then let's add some transmission, Don't be afraid of building something that is not 100% done or 100% ready. Because eventually, when you build the wheels, maybe a customer says, actually, I love boats. So scrap the wheels, because if you build everything, and you kind of on the top picture where you have the bike, the motorbike, etc., when you reach out the van or the kind of lorry, maybe it's too late, and that's why, I always encourage my team, and when I meet with other founders, is just build incrementally, all the features that you think, because potentially that could go in a complete different direction, in midway through. So yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think it speaks to building for the problem that you're trying to solve rather than building the solution, because that's what you're trying to build and fit into those customers' hands. And I think a good culture and a good connection between the development team and what the business is ultimately trying to solve for has got to help that process.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think, some really good lessons there for founders. I think it's really interesting, to understand the way that you've gone about this, especially in a business in, that cloud space, as well as one that's fully remote, as well as one that is, reaching into different areas geographically as well. So no, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. I'd love to find out more about the remote culture side of things, but I think rather than overwhelm people, I think the kind of the key lessons that I'm hearing here, I think are ones definitely worth taking away in terms of that product focus, customer focus, problem focus, and some good strategies for chunking that up in terms of building it as well as taking it to the market as well. Have been really, really interesting. So thank you for sharing those today.
No, thank you, Matthew, for inviting me, and wish you best of luck to every founder. It's not an easy ride, but it's really, really interesting.
Absolutely, it's not easy. It is interesting, and I hope with this podcast we can hopefully show some founders what are the core principles that you should be bearing in mind, but help them realize there are different strategies, different tactics that they can take forward. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today. I'll certainly look forward to keeping track of StackZone, seeing how it develops, how you go against that 12-month goal of expanding globally as well. So thank you again.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.